1 p.m. is the deadline. And as I write at NinersWire.com, and this is a time of year where you're trying to you got to do all the trade stuff, and are they going to trade for this and that? And so around trade time, and we know this from MLB, we know this from the NBA, trade time happens, and every big name comes out. Every big name on the market, every big name that is not on the market. We see with the Kings, or not with the Kings, with the 49ers. It's like, oh man, Max Crosby? Okay, Max Crosby? Oh, so the Dolphins are Tyreek Hill? Oh, could you imagine? Hey man, let's reel this in. Because I think the 49ers are about to have a very disappointing trade deadline. Where if you're talking yourself into the biggest names, I've seen DeForest Buckner has been out there a lot. Actually wrote about that.
That's the worst, right? That we have to write about these things?
Yes.
That you have, like, you know how many times I've written that the Kings are intrigued by Kyle Kuzma, and how many times I've had to dive deep into the Kyle Kuzma catalog here.
Of course.
Oh god.
You're a Kyle Kuzma expert at this point.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking about where were you when sports moments. I'll never forget where I was the day you flipped on the idea of the Kings adding Kyle Kuzma.
Oh.
Yeah. You were digging into his contract, and you were like, actually, you know what? I'm kind of in.
I'm in.
We were sitting at one of the high top tables right out there in the kitchen. I was like, all right, hey, Ham, welcome to no, man. I just here because the 49ers are kind of stuck between this rock and this hard place where I think I want to put a pin in the DeForest Buckner thing specifically for a second, where I think their front office believes that they owe it to Trent Williams and Kyle Juszczyk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and all these guys who have been around and have been through it with this team to go try and compete for a championship this year. That means making a move because their current roster may not make the playoffs, much less go to the Super Bowl, much less win the Super Bowl. They need to make an addition or two. For me, specifically on the defensive line, you could talk me into linebacker. I have wide receiver further down the list, but you can debate who or what they need. I think they're going to wind up adding like a rotational defensive end, maybe a rotational defensive tackle. And that's going to kind of be the extent of it. Because they have to walk this line. They have to walk this line between pushing chips in this year and making a move that could help this year. But also, they I don't believe, are going to go unload first, second round picks, multiple future picks, whatever, to go add a player this year. Because you know what? Right now, they're not one of the 5 best teams in the league. And are they going to sacrifice their future? Because that's what they have to start thinking about. They signed Brandon Ayuk to this long-term deal. They have the Brock Purdy long-term deal coming up. They have to start thinking about what does this team look like over the next 3 to 5 years instead of just this year. So they're walking this line between, okay, got to make a move that substantially affects their Super Bowl chances this year without completely torpedoing their chances to improve their team over the next 2 or 3 years. And so I think they're going to go, yeah, Christian McCaffrey's coming back. Juwan Jennings will be back after the bye week. And you go trade for a rotational defensive tackle or a defensive end who's fallen out of favor with their team. You give up a couple of late round picks for those guys and move forward and see what happens. Like, that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think DeForest Buckner, Max Crosby, whatever big name is out there, I don't see it.
Okay, so I kind of agree with what you're saying there, but I'm going to say this, like, are they looking at themselves the same way that you're looking at them? Because I know they're 4-4, but for my money, while you lost to Minnesota, if somehow you avoid Minnesota in the playoffs, you avoid going to Minnesota in the playoffs, and even Minnesota,
where they haven't won since 1992.
Yeah, they're on the slide already. They've taken a step backwards. I think that the Aiden Hutchinson injury changed the calculus for what the Niners would do, because I think that they look at the Lions as probably the best team in the NFC, and without Aiden Hutchinson, who are they? Are they nearly as dangerous? Do you think that they're a title contender without him? And maybe they are still. And
they're scoring 50 points a game.
No, I agree with you, but they're also playing bad teams and scoring 50 points a game.
Sure.
And so I think when that injury happened, if there is a way for the 49ers to get into an arms race with Detroit, that's the team that I'm circling. I don't think that there's another team. Like, I'm not worried about the Commanders. Like, can the Commanders win a playoff game? Sure. I think there are a bunch of teams that can win a playoff game. But if I'm really being honest about the NFC, it's wide open, and there's one team that I'm really worried about if I'm the 49ers.
Who's that?
And that's the Lions. I think talent-wise, you've got as much. And when they lose a game-changing superstar defensive lineman that, like, really is like prime Aaron Donald, like, he impacts the game so much. When you lose him, what do they look like going forward? And yeah, they've been able to keep it up, and their offense is flying. But I think that team, that the 49ers beat them last year, even though they probably shouldn't have, and they probably feel like that's the team to beat. So can I get to that level? I'm not worried about the Chiefs. I'm not worried about Baltimore or Buffalo.
Right.
I got to worry right now about a very specific team, and can I find a way to improve my defense to get up to that standard?
I don't want to nitpick and derail the conversation. I'm not putting Aiden Hutchinson in prime Aaron Donald territory yet.
Yeah,
prime Aaron Donald might be the best defensive player the league's ever seen.
No, but he's close.
But he's
like,
super. He is. Like I said, I didn't want to nitpick and derail the conversation. Yeah. He is a very, very impactful player, no doubt. Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and will be as long as he's healthy. Right. Obviously, in the future. I think Detroit is a legitimate threat. The deeper we go into this Jaden Daniels Washington thing, the more I'm inclined to believe it.
Okay.
But yeah, Atlanta, no. Arizona, no. Green Bay, I think, is very good. Minnesota, I think, will get back on track. I trust Kevin O'Connell and their coaching staff. But yeah, outside of that, man, like, Tampa Bay doesn't scare me anymore. Chicago, it's fine. Philly looks a lot better lately. Philly's super talented, and if they get if they've turned it around defensively quite a bit.
They're like the 49ers.
So I think there's more teams than just Detroit in the NFC, but okay. So considering what I laid out about the future, would you, if John Lynch called you James and said, "Hey, James, currently dresses as Kenny Caraway, should we trade first round picks to acquire a player to help us this year?" What would you tell him?
It would have to be an over-the-top, long-term fixture, nothing short-term, that you're going to have to figure out the dynamics of your salary down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But 25, 26-year-old, maybe 27-year-old, game-changing defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Like, it would have to be something over the top. Not like, it doesn't have to be another Nick Bosa, but like close. Like, it would have to be a very, very good player.
Yeah.
And I don't know that player is really out there and available to be traded.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. I mean, because when you have them, like, why would you give them up unless you're really getting a lot for it?
So this is where the DeForest Buckner conversation gets interesting for me. Because I think DeForest Buckner is the type of player that could be had for maybe like a mid-round pick. And he's the type of player that I think would help the 49ers pretty dramatically. And we know he's good.
Yeah.
B, he plays the position that they need help at and have needed help ever since they traded him away to begin with. The problem is you talk about how do teams view themselves. The Colts are 4-4. They are half a game back of the Chargers for a playoff spot, and they are benching Anthony Richardson, their second-year former first-round pick, for Joe Flacco, presumably because they think Joe Flacco gives them a better chance to win. Now, I was listening to a podcast this morning where they pitched the idea that, they were all in agreement, by the way, that this benching for Anthony Richardson is a punishment for pulling himself out of the game the other day or last week. And that, hey, yeah, they're going to bench him for a game. They're going to start Joe Flacco, and then it'll be Anthony Richardson the rest of the way. I completely disagree.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you.
If Anthony Richardson was like tearing it up, that'd be one thing. But he's been really bad. They are on the precipice of being in the playoffs and or being in the top 7 going into week 10. I think they're starting Joe Flacco because they think Joe Flacco gives them a better chance to win.
I totally agree with you.
And because of that, I don't think they're that interested in getting rid of DeForest Buckner, who they just gave a 2-year, $46 million contract to this offseason. I don't think they want to move him right now. But if the Colts go out and lose to the Vikings this weekend, and Joe Flacco loses a game, and now they're like, man, all right, we got Anthony Richardson, we got Joe Flacco, trade deadline's coming up, and the Niners want to give us a 3rd-round pick for DeForest Buckner. Now that door opens a little bit. And maybe they're just out. Maybe they say DeForest Buckner is going to be a Colt for life. We're never going to move him, and that's what it's going to be. Sure. But I think if there's a world where he's available, it's the one where Joe Flacco and the Colts lose this weekend. It's the last game before the trade deadline, and they get an offer they can't turn down from a team like San Francisco. And if I'm San Francisco, to your point, that's the move where I'm going, okay, I'm going to open my war chest here and dish out some of this draft capital to get a player who is going to be impactful as a run stopper. He's going to be impactful as a pass rusher, and just alters your defense and what the peak version of your defense looks like.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. And I would point out too, like Anthony Richardson, I think a lot of fans got all excited because in week 1, he won a bunch of fantasy football games. Like he was like super crazy good. He is so bad right now that we're talking Deshaun Watson bad. Like on this season, he's completing 44.4% of his passes. He's got 958 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 7 picks.
Oof.
And then you look at Flacco, 65.7% of his passes. On top of that, he's got 7 touchdowns and 1 interception on the season, 16 yards. He's just a much better quarterback right now. And like, I don't know when you give up on a player. I mean, we've seen the Bryce Young thing in Carolina, and now he's back in the fold because he has to be, because Andy Dalton got in a car accident. But realistically, like sometimes a quarterback just shows you that they're not good enough. And the mental aspect of the NFL is so brutal. Watching Richardson on the sidelines is horrible. Like he's got stink face like the whole time.
I can't get there. That's just his face, man.
I get it, but he looks like he's disengaged. He pulled himself out of a game. He's been flat out bad.
I will rock with you on. Pulling yourself out of a game because you're tired is nuts.
Yeah.
That's just an insane thing to do. And apparently Colts players have like taken him aside and been like, don't do that.
Never
like,
again.
That's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. I'm not gonna harp on somebody because of their face.
I don't know. It just looks like he's disengaged. It does. It looks like he's angry. He's pissed. He just doesn't feel it.
Didn't DeMarcus Cousins say he always got technicals because of his face?
Yeah. He also did not like when we talked about his facial expressions. He didn't. He was like, it's like, but
it's his face. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but he's demonstrative in his normal facial expressions.
I can be
one
demonstrative.
Thing. Yeah. But like the anger face all the time, or like it's tough. I don't know. And again, Richardson just flat out as a quarterback has been bad. Like I think the only other quarterback in the league that we can point to right now that has been as bad as him is Deshaun Watson before he got injured. And I mean, at a certain point,
really bad.
If you're a head coach, if you're a franchise, you have to say we can't just let the other 55 guys lose every week because of one dude isn't good enough.
Sure.
And maybe he'll be good enough next year.
Right. But that's where the line is. Like that's the tough line to walk, is maybe he'll be good enough next year, but also he has 10 starts. Anthony Richardson had the same criticism coming out of the draft that Trey Lance did. Like, this guy just hasn't played a ton of football.
Yeah.
There's development that needs to happen here, but man, these physical tools are insane. He is like off the charts physically talented. And you see it when he runs the was it Alec Pierce that he hit the deep ball to in week 1 this year?
Oh yeah.
Like he is one of 2 guys in the league that can make that throw, right? So I understand like the we need to compete this year. There are 52 other guys on this roster that we are trying to win for, and they are right there. The Colts are not terrible. Like, they are a half game behind the Chargers.
Yeah.
They win, Chargers lose, Colts are a playoff team, right? Like that's what it's going to take. So I understand that, but at the same time, are you cutting Anthony Richardson's legs out from under him? And hey, you know what? By not letting him play now, like they're running it. It's the Trey Lance conversation all over again.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, okay, you could play him and you might lose a lot, but he needs the development. And can you sacrifice that year where you have this really good team or this playoff team in the Colts case, where you think you have a playoff team, but you need to let this guy play. But also if he plays, you may not make the playoffs. Like that's a really, really tough line to walk. And if you're a GM, you're a head coach, like you got players to worry about. You got a job to worry about.
Yeah.
I don't think this has anything to do with the fact he pulled himself out of a game beyond the Colts going, oh, he's just not that dude.
Yeah, but I'm also going to point out that teams around the league, when they make the decision on their backup quarterback, the 49ers last year, they went out, they got Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was not going to take Brock Purdy's job.
No.
You know, if you're the Raiders, you went out and got Gardner Minshew because he's like that fringe starter guy.
Sure.
When you're the Colts and you went out during the offseason and you paid Joe Flacco to come in and be your backup, you did that with an intention that if things went south and if you were good enough and your quarterback wasn't, that Flacco's going to be there and maybe can help you win some games. This is the exact situation.
And they knew that because Joe Flacco was so good for the Browns last year that he won comeback player of the year over DeMar Hamlin, who died.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yep.
So they brought him in knowing exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
They didn't bring this, oh yeah, no, he's going to be a good mentor. No, man, you brought him in because you were worried Anthony Richardson wasn't going to be good enough and you were going to need a guy who could go start and win games.
That's right.
So we'll see if it works. I hope it does. It would be a really fun story. Yeah. But
I mean, that's why Andy Dalton is in Carolina.
I don't envy the decision makers in Indianapolis whatsoever.
Yeah.
So moral of the story is I think the 49ers are going to have a boring trade deadline. Michigan Wolverines, our resident Colts fan, says the Colts aren't trading Defoe. Yeah, probably not. But we also heard the 49ers are never going to trade DeForest Buckner too, and they did. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I wouldn't trade him.
I wouldn't bet on it. That's why I just like people were like Max Crosby, DeForest Buckner, Tyreek Hill, whoever. It's like, man, these dudes aren't moving. No.
And if they are, you're throwing a whole bunch of
a lot.
I mean, what did we just saw a left tackle get traded, right?
Yeah.
That was big money.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't even give up that much, right?
No, it was a like late round pick swap, I think.
Oh, that's weird.
Is it a sixth for Cam Robinson and a seventh? But Cam Robinson had just been benched by the Jags. So the Vikings, I guess, upgraded a left tackle, but it's not like they got an all-pro. So
okay,
that's the other issue with Minnesota when you start talking about teams in the NFC. Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, was a monster. And imagine, it sounds crazy, right? Because it's like, man, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Sam Darnold's been really good. Their defense is awesome. Imagine taking Trent Williams off of the 49ers right now.
Nope. I don't want to imagine that.
You've called him the MVP of the team. And that's just as good. Right. So that's kind of where the Vikings are at. So I think the Niners have a ways to go to be competitive in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to look at this and go, all right, Christian McCaffrey coming back. Juwan Jennings going to be healthy. Ricky Pearsall getting mixed in. Renardo Green, their rookie corner, has been really good. Malik Mustafa has stepped in as a starting safety. He's looked really good. Maybe Dre Greenlaw comes back at some point. Kyle Shanahan said that he didn't want to put a timeline on it, but they're hopeful to get him back some point shortly after the bye, back in practice, get him out there moving around. Maybe they're looking at that. And I think that's what they're going to talk themselves into with some defensive end who's a healthy scratch for a team and a rotational defensive tackle. And they'll try and help their depth and hope that Christian McCaffrey can bail them out. That's what I think is coming.